This is day 3 of working with Mystic on picking up all of her feet. And this was a really exciting day. This was the first time that I was able to touch her hind feet on both sides. This is a little bit of a longer video, so if that is something that you are just wanting to skip to, you certainly can at about the 22-minute mark. If you're feeling pretty confident, with working with your Mustang and you're able to touch them most everywhere already, then, you could definitely do that. But if you're, nervous or struggling with how to connect the dots of where you're able to touch your Mustang right now and getting all the way to their hind feet, I would encourage you to stick through this whole video with me, and I'll cover some other topics throughout, and just good tips and pointers for working with your Mustang in general. Right now, we're just doing our usual warm-up of a little bit of leading around before getting into the session. I just want to remind everybody again that I intentionally did this as an unedited series because I want everyone to have the opportunity to see how these small marginal gains and building blocks eventually all fall into place to be able to get to these really big milestones, and that it is about all of these tiny little steps and releases of pressure that help create patterns and routines for these horses that make it easier for it to trust when you step into these new territories, such as touching the back feet and keeping yourself and your horse safe throughout the process. This was a hotter day, and we also worked a little earlier in the day, so the flies were really out, and I decided to use my surroundings to my advantage. So she was being really irritated by the flies, and I just kind of wanted to do sort of an active rest today and just spending some time grooming her. So if you're choosing to do that, that's something that you can definitely take more time. I'm not going to say that you're limited to, 15, 20 minutes. It's really all about reading your Mustang, and if they are enjoying it, go ahead and take your time with them. That is something you want to be careful of too, that if they're really enjoying the time with you, that you're not ending the session too early, because that can be considered a form of negative punishment, meaning that you are taking away something that they are enjoying. I didn't have any expectations going into today. I just wanted to spend some time with her. I had just spent the last 2 days in a row actively working with touching her lower legs in the front. So just wanted to take this time to make her feel good, kind of give her an active rest day, and see where this might lead. I've used this brush on her a couple times, and she really likes it. She's still not a fan. I like to sort of offer it to them so they can sniff it or look at it with their nose and eyes, but she really doesn't like that. It's really interesting, so I've actually found the best way to connect with her with these kind of things is just kind of show it to her a couple feet away and then start going towards her shoulder with it. Her shoulder is that that common ground that her and I have where we can work together from that point. So I started on her shoulder there with the brush and just giving her frequent breaks here, a little bit of release of pressure just to check in with her, make sure that she's still enjoying it, not getting overwhelmed, give her time to think about it. You definitely could tell like her eyes and ears were on me, and she didn't seem alarmed. She was mostly irritated by the flies here, but I still like to pause there, and I love that she gave me a lick and chew there, so that I definitely knew we were okay to keep going. I have gotten to this part of her body on her back near her hip once or twice. It's still a newer area for her, so I'm really being cognizant of, is she okay with this, or is she starting to tense up? And some of those subtle cues that you can look for when you are starting into new areas is, are they slowing down their rate of blinking? So if they don't blink as often, or they kind of see their eye freezes, that's a first sign that they might be going into some tension. And where are their ears? Do they have both their ears on you? Is one kind of casually on you? And then it's a little harder if using a brush, so I did start with my hand first, and just feeling the fascia and the muscle under your hand as you're moving along their body. Are their muscles tensing up? And if they are, then that's always a good opportunity to just stop the movement. You can leave your hand there for a moment, wait for any of that tension to release, and then you remove your hand because you're removing the pressure. And that's what they're learning from. They're learning from the release of pressure. So this does, like I said, this is a longer video. I'm just kind of working through all the areas that I know we're comfortable with. And one thing I'm keeping an eye on is where is she showing that she might have a fly irritating her? And if it's an area we've been to before, then I will go directly to that area and brush it. That's a great way to show them how observant you are and that you're noticing their subtle cues. And that can help improve the relationship and communication between the two of you. When she moved away there, she didn't really seem too uncomfortable with where I was brushing her. I think it was either just the flies or just kind of repositioning herself. So shortly thereafter, I did still give her a break just to make sure that she was still okay. That lower back and hip area for us is still a newer area, so it's not we're not consistent with it yet. Some days she's been great with it, other days she's been more sensitive to me in that area. I'm continuing to be really cognizant of her demeanor throughout this process and any session that we work together, and that it's not all necessarily going to go exactly the same. Right now, I'm continuing to recover similar areas that I've been to and just strengthening those more and more. And my other Mustang, Juniper, who's always such a helper, was playing with this strap that I had and making all sorts of wonderful clanking noises. So just removing that distraction from the area. At that moment, Mystic was really comfortable with me standing in front of her. I decided to take the opportunity and move to her right side that she's a little more hesitant at. I took one step back here and petted her with my hand first before bringing the brush back in, which she had no problem with. It never hurts, though, to take a couple steps back and just go to a place where you know they're really confident in and then build from that. It worked really well today, taking advantage of the hotter weather. She really enjoyed and relaxed into being brushed this day. I previously touched her there behind her elbow with my hand as a pre-cue to sliding my hand down her leg. So decided to see how she would feel with the brush there. Really seemed to respond well, but since it was a newer area and a more sensitive area for them in general, just gave her a moment here to take that in and see what she thought. One thing that was really cool there is that was one of the first times on this side, that I didn't start at the shoulder. I started in her mid-back and just was able to continue on back from there. So over time, as I've repeated these steps over and over again, I don't always have to go back to the shoulder, which is square one. I've now built in multiple starting points that she's comfortable with. I can't stress enough remembering to breathe and take deep, audible exhales. It helps you relax so much, and it shows the horse that this is not a stressful situation. I'm relaxed and you can be relaxed too. She had a fly there under her chin. I've touched that area a few times. It's not super strong, but I took advantage of that fly being there and trying to reach out to, help scratch that itch for her. And she really responded well to that. Here I'm really focusing in on the cues from her face. That was the first time I really brushed down her hip as far as I did there. And I apologize that the camera cut out her face here, but you can really see her ears are back on me. She was really tuned in to checking out what I was doing. So I was taking more frequent breaks there to make sure that she was able to take it all in. And that was such a great response from her. She lowered her head a little bit. She did do a quick lick and chew and just kind of reached back to me, more or less making a bid for connection. So I want to reward that and just give her a nice rub on the face there. Using that connection again to scratch under her chin, strengthening that even more. These frequent breaks are one of the most important parts throughout this process. You're really giving the horse a chance to think about everything that happened and learn from it for the future. I found myself getting lulled into Mystic's calm energy on this day, and that's totally okay because that's you and your horse connecting, getting on the same level. At the same time, I'm making sure to still stay vigilant and tuning into any cues that she's giving me so that I am not misreading her. I've switched back and forth between both sides several times now. I do that intentionally to help create and strengthen correlations between both sides. Anytime that I go from the left to the right, I copy on the right side what I had just done on the left in order to help try and strengthen that unity between her left and right side and making her as even as possible. The only thing I edited out there was me stopping and restarting the video with Juniper hanging around so much. I wanted to make sure that the camera was still tracking Mystic accurately. At this point, she is thoroughly relaxed and was really enjoying being groomed, and I felt really happy that her and I were able to connect this way. So while we may have not been moving directly forward on picking up the feet, this was a great bonding experience that in itself is going to strengthen the foundation for making progress hereafter. I did start brushing her lower on her hip there and wanted to really pay attention to what she thought about that. She could see she looked at me a little bit more and was curious about what I was doing, so I stopped there and she quickly lowered her head. And I was continuing to wait for her to let me know what she wanted to do, and then I loved how she took that step in towards me, which was the green light to continue on what we were doing. Here I'm watching her face, her ears, her eyes, making sure that, maybe her lips aren't getting tight or wrinkled. That's another form of tension, sort of similar to how we might clench or lock our jaw if we are uneasy with the situation. She was watching the other horses out in the pasture, and her foal Loki was out there too, so she was just kind of checking on him and hanging out with me. This time when I went lower down on her hip, about 8 inches above her hock, she was definitely paying attention to what I was doing, but very comfortable with it. At this point, I felt really confident that she was in a good place mentally and emotionally. I wanted to see where we could explore on her hind legs. So I returned to her front legs just to reestablish that pattern and use that strong pattern that we have with the front legs to try and link it up with the hind legs. I started with the strongest leg, which is the front left, just to see what she thought again of me brushing all the way down. And didn't have a care in the world, so I just really liked having that checkpoint and the positive response I got from her on that, to maybe exploring where we can get to on the hind legs. Here you notice I didn't have to start at the shoulder this time, which was really awesome. So I also now had another strong checkpoint here on her lower back to be able to start from there and go down the leg, which was another really positive sign that she's getting more comfortable with more of her body being handled. So these are all just great little subtle ways that you can do check-ins with your horse to gauge how are they going to respond to if I try something new. When she did that, I think I wasn't sure, there was a fly on her chest, so I wasn't sure if she was responding to the new area I went to on her leg or just the fly irritating her. So either way, I wanted to listen to her and use that opportunity to scratch that itch for her and give her a break. Starting over with that same pattern, following down her hip. Really paying attention to her facial cues at this point: ears, eyes, any tension in the jaw, to make sure that I'm not pushing her into a threshold she's not capable of handling. And at this point, I hadn't even really stretched into a threshold. This was me being overly cautious, making sure that I'm going to be keeping myself safe. Obviously, this is a really vulnerable spot to put yourself in. So just being as careful as I possibly can throughout this process. Taking a little break and just giving her some love up on her shoulder and her neck. One point here, if you're still working with getting your Mustang okay with you touching their face, keep these subtle details in mind. Right now you see I'm looking the same direction as she is and using my left hand. So my left hand is behind her eye, coming up under her eye. So from her view, she might be able to see a little bit of my forearm below her eye. But now I make this change now where my body position is facing her. I'm using my right hand. And now she's seeing my forearm coming into her view from a completely different angle. And the reason I bring this up is maybe sometimes you go to pet your Mustang on the face one day and they're great. And then the next time you go back and they freak out. And it doesn't seem to make sense. They are so sensitive and take everything into account. So even just a subtle body angle change like that and using a different hand can really throw them off. So being very intentional in how are you approaching the horse, and are you using the same pattern for how you pet their face? Are you looking the same direction, using the same hand, arm, etc.? All those minute details really mean something to these horses. That was something I had to build up to with her for sure. I established a really strong pattern with petting her face of always using the hand closest to her when I was looking the same direction she was. And it was after some time where I could easily walk in front of her and cross sides when I started working on changing the angle of my body and having a more direct contact with her and touching her head. So there she's actually letting me kind of mess with her forelock a little bit and just rub under there, and I kind of pulled it out of her eye so she could see. Initially that would have really spooked her. We're back to the strong side, and I'm just using my hand now instead of the brush. That is taking a step back for us. She's more used to my hand than the brush, so I wanted to use that in deciding to see how far she was okay with me running my hand down her hind leg. So just sort of slow, and I apologize that this is not in the frame. You'll see better when I go to the right side. But right there, I was just rubbing just below her hip, narrows into her leg, and taking short breaks there. So now I'm on her hock. And I'm stepped out so that if she does react, I have a safe bubble around me to not get kicked. And I can also, from this direction, keep a really keen eye on her facial expressions. Also, with using your hand, I'm able to feel how is the muscle under my hand. Is she tensing up when my hand is moving further down? So I'm really able to stay in tune with her here through this new process of touching the hind leg. So far, she's just taking notice of what I'm doing and handling it extremely well. So I got down to just below her hock there and no reaction. So I took a break, went back up to her shoulder just to give her a reassuring rub and make sure that I wasn't missing her slipping into tension or approaching her threshold. So she did block me there a little bit from going over to her right side. So I'm just going to stand and wait. And then see, there she let me in. So just giving her that moment to think about it before acting on it can make such a big difference. On this side, revisiting all the areas that I know she's really comfortable in to eventually building up to that hind leg. More or less, lots of reassurance here. I like how she turned her head in towards me to connect with me. At that moment, she also might have been a little unsure with my hand there, so I just connected with her with rubbing her face and giving her a moment before continuing on. Always keeping that contact from a point that you know they're comfortable at makes such a huge difference for them. They're just scratching her at the base of her withers. I'm keeping my motion really slow and methodical, and anytime I'm stretching down into a new area, I'm just sort of softly going over that and then moving back up to an area that I know she's good with, and then giving her a moment to think about that new experience. I loved this, that she moved closer into me and then relaxed her hind leg. It really is amazing how much these horses will communicate with you when you give them the time and the opportunity to. So here, just using a really nice reassuring, almost like a massaging motion, and always coming back up to an area that she's more confident in, just to re-solidify that idea of being comfortable in a new situation. When I got down to her fetlock there, I took a really big deep breath to help keep myself calm and also her. So I'm going down to her fetlock again, keeping my head away from her foot, being able to see her facial expressions so I can sense if there's any tension and quickly respond as needed. But the whole idea here was that entire initial setup of just spending time with her, connecting with her, grooming to help get us to where we did today. And I was so elated that was able to do it with both hind legs, running my hand all the way down, having her stay calm, relaxed, and understand what was going on. That was the goal. And so after doing that on her right side, which is her left confident one, I took some time here to relax and connect with her before calling it a day. One thing I've learned throughout doing this several times now is not to treat anything the horse does as arbitrary. And if you look at everything they do as having a purpose or meaning behind it, it opens up so much opportunity to be able to read them more accurately and keep them below a threshold and work through situations together in this way. After taking the halter off, when she turned her head in towards me, it really seemed like she still wanted to connect. So I listened to that and just rubbed her on the face a little bit here, making sure that I'm not unintentionally creating negative punishment here by taking away something too early that she is enjoying. I hope this helps you on your journey of building a relationship with your horse or Mustang. And like and subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more videos in this series of getting Mystic ready for her first hoof trim with the farrier.